Welcome to session 2 of my session on textual attractors in unseen poetry. So if you attended the session earlier on, we would have just gone through the importance of immersing yourself in the poetry text. So we're looking at unseen poetry here. And thinking about GCSE and A-level students who may be struggling perhaps to access poems that they haven't seen before. So earlier on we looked at just immersing yourself in the text and asking really low stakes questions about it to draw on prior knowledge or schemata that students may have as they come into the reading of the text. So first of all then, I love a bit of Latin. So we think about the word texere, which is where we get the word text from. And what we're going to be doing in the rest of the session is looking at how these links and threads weave together a text and link together so that it becomes very clear that they're all part of the same text and they all form together to provide us with a narrative or a bigger picture. So Stockwell talked about this idea of textual attractors. We ask our students to draw on their own schema or schemata, their knowledge of the world about them. So once they've read the text, they can then start to sort of build a narrative picture of the poem that they're talking about or that they're analysing. So Stockwell says a good way to do this is to look at, based on what their background is, look at the things that stand out to them in the text. We call this the textual attractors. So he says, readers will bring their own experiences to bear on the given structure of the text. If a group of people are asked to read a poem and pick out what stands out to them, they will likely choose a variety of aspects which are their textual attractors. Okay, so the idea there being that students will read the text and different things will stand out to them compared to perhaps the person who's sitting next to them in the class, and that's absolutely fine. They pick up on their textual attractors, which are the things that they're more likely to be able to talk about when they start analysing the poem. For anybody that was unable to join us for the earlier session, this is the poem that we're looking at. So it's an extract from Murder in the Cathedral by T.S. Eliot, and it's the first 8 lines of the longer 50-line poem. So focused on the poor women of Canterbury, they have a feeling, a sense that something bad is about to happen. So if you need to, you can have a look at this now. So just read the text and you can pause the video in order to do that, just so that you've caught up with everybody else that might have seen the session earlier on. And then what we've done with this is we've asked the W questions and we've got the students to ask questions of the text themselves, anything that they think they can answer or anything they feel that they might need clarification on, and get them just to think about the narrative or the story of the poem. For anybody who knows about Canterbury and Canterbury Cathedral will know that T.S. Eliot was recounting the story of Thomas Becket and his murder or martyrdom in the cathedral. So we're talking about textual attractors, and I've talked before about the idea that it's good to step away from the poem and not look at those individual language features and feature spot, but rather get that sense of the background of the poem before you start zooming in on language features. At that point, when you're kind of in tune with any background knowledge and schema that you want to bring to the analysis of the text, students can start to think about, literally, very simple question, what stands out to me? And I've put some images here from the film A Beautiful Mind, starring Russell Crowe, directed by Ron Howard, where at one point in the in the film, he's a mathematician and he's trying to find a code. He's suffering from schizophrenia. It's a wonderful film if you fancy watching it and haven't done. But I love this image of where it's literally what is illuminated. What do you see? What stands out to you? And it's the bits that are illuminated, can't say that word, in poetry that students can then begin to start writing about. So you may well have had a student who's answered one of the questions about Canterbury, for example, and what we're going to do now is have a look at how that background knowledge we can start to build those patterns of analysis in the text. So we start first of all by thinking about the text array. How has the writer woven the elements into the text? So a student might say, oh Miss, Canterbury sounds a bit like a place. Well, yes, it is. Okay, so let's have a look then at the sense of place and any words or phrases that link to the sense of place. Anybody doing A-level may introduce this as deixis, and we have distal deixis and proximal deixis with the speaker at the deictic centre, or in the centre of the kind of the narrative. So here the centre of our narrative is the women, the poor women of Canterbury. We have here let us stand is close to them. And then further away is, references to the cathedral being further away. There is no safety in the cathedral. So get them to look, one of the ways that they can look at this is sequence it according to place. And then start to think about why. Why has the writer done it like this? Okay, and start to look at the patterns. And I'm going to come to that in a moment. So the next bit then, I've just put the poem in the background there. You can also think about the who in the W questions. So who is the poetic voice? Whose voice is speaking to us? Why is it that person? Why has the poet chosen that person or those people? In this case, it's the poor women of Canterbury. And again, you pick out the words that might relate to who. In this case, we've got us, we, us, the poor women of Canterbury, we, us, our, we, or something like that. Okay, so what you've got is you're just picking out the words, only the words that stand out to you that reflect the position of the poetic voice, and see what you find. Once you've done that, then what you can do is start to list these ideas. So I'm not very mathematical, but I do like this approach. It's very logical. So you've highlighted in the poem, you might have highlighted, or the student might have highlighted all the words relating to place and all the words relating to person. And then what they would do is literally list them in order. And then you can look for the patterns. So here we've got some patterns. So we look for the patterns. And we also look for any anomalies, anything that stands out to us even further. So for me, and this would be different for anybody doing this, I've got, for example, once I get this in a list, there is a definite pattern for both of these. So here we have proximal deixis or proximal terms here, close by here. Then we have two with the cathedral and Canterbury. And then we've got there, as in, it's further away, and the cathedral, difficult to tell. But we do end with that focus on the cathedral, which suggests that women are being drawn towards it. So I think that there is definitely a pattern here with starting close and ending up further away, but this sense of being drawn towards the cathedral. In the person list, I think this becomes more significant, because what we have is a whole load of first person plural pronouns here, suggesting that togetherness of the poor women of Canterbury. But look at this, the only reference to the people and who it's about in an extended noun phrase here, the poor women of Canterbury, the rest of it is all pronouns. But it's right in the middle of this section of the poem, which maybe suggests that these women are right in the centre of this tribulation, or this thing that's going to happen. They can't get out of it. So I'm not suggesting that your students will pick out deixis or place deixis, because they might not have that built into their, into their repertoire of textual analysis. But there are some things that they can look at. For example, just get them to look at what stands out to them. It might be that they pick out all the adjectives in the poem and look at those. Now, for me, that's actually quite difficult in this poem because I think there is only two adjectives, and that's poor and poor. So, although actually, even though there isn't any adjectives apart from that, that actually does signal something about the message, that this is about poor people, it's about people that don't have a voice. But something that students can do is look at these repeated phrases or any other patterns that stand out and let them have a look. So for me, and again, I'll just sort of show you some of the things that I've picked out just by saying, right, my criteria is I'm going to look at what's repeated. So here I've got, and you saw the poem in the background before, and I'd highlighted that, and then I'm doing exactly the same process. I've listed them. So I've got, what's the repetition? Here let us, here let us. We've got a what and a what. Then we've got there is no, compelled, forced, forced. Well, really interesting, because what we have here is we have this sense of fairly gentle imperative, here let us go, and ends with this declarative, but the meaning or the semantics behind the declarative verbs here in terms of compelled and forced really give a sense of that there is actually no choice. So where it starts off as something that's gentler, it ends in something that's much more sort of definite. In the middle here, you've got two interrogatives suggesting maybe confusion. And then you've got a negative declarative repeated, no and no, suggesting actually they do have no choice and that they're being drawn towards the cathedral. Now, A-level students might recognise that as deontic modal shading, that sense of obligation, whereas potentially with the indirect at the beginning, that's something that offers a little bit more choice. But again, GCSE students will be able to hopefully just pick out some of these patterns and these ideas and say, right, I'm going to list them and see what I find. Lists, great, not just for your shopping, but for poetry analysis as well. So a last criteria that students may want to look at, and again, that students can choose, so they could look at verbs, they could look at reference to people, they could look at a semantic field of negative, or that's perhaps not a semantic field, is it? But negative words, or a semantic field of weather, or whatever it is. It's just what stands out to them. So we've got the poem here, and finally, what I thought was quite interesting is I've picked out the opposites or the binaries in this poem. In fact, there's quite a few, and I've only picked out one. I've picked out the idea of danger and safety. So how can you have danger and safety at the same time? So, but if we look at this, we can see, again, we can see a pattern. So we have danger, safety, danger, no safety. Significantly, I think this ends with the idea of no safety. And then after that, it goes into the sense of being compelled or forced to witness. So it ends on that idea of no safety, which, even though they're kind of swinging between the two in this part of the poem, it's pretty clear at the end that, they're frightened, that there is danger there. The other issue that you've got is at the beginning where you've got danger and safety. They are both framed as interrogatives. I think there's, 4 interrogatives or questions in the first part of this verse. So it's they're kind of wavering between, is it safe or is it dangerous? But it's that fear that comes out of the poor women of Canterbury. In terms of messages then, we can look at this now. We can look at these lists and say, well, what is the message here? Well, on a surface level, the message is it's about poor women of Canterbury. It's about people who are drawn into danger. But let's look in a bit more detail. What actually is this poem about? Why write about this? And it's that why again, I've got it on the slide here, that you can start to sort of establish. You can sort of build that through your analysis. So in this case, T.S. Eliot, why is he writing this? It's about, normal poor people, the minority groups here, in this case, women and the poor. And that they find, that they have no voice, that they have no say in their destiny and what they're forced to do. Is probably something that you would build in terms of that kind of metaphorical meaning. So this second part of this session is all about just not being frightened to apply what stands out to you, or the textual attractors that might come out of a text. So once the students have formed some form of story or narrative by questioning and bringing in their prior knowledge, they're then starting to say, well, what is illuminated, what stands out to me? Let's look at that. And it's that kind of drawing of patterns across a text is something that can be very valuable, especially if your students are aiming for higher levels. So I've finished now, so I'm hoping that you'll find that useful, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of the day.